Welcome back to Traveling Dice. This is Jason. I have a video for you today where I'm trying to answer this question, taking a look at Warhammer Age of Sigmar, new release, Slave to Darkness Chaos Warriors. Now, the question I'm trying to answer here is, do they rank up? Now, why do I care? Number one, I don't play Age of Sigmar. I still play Warhammer Fantasy 8th Edition. And I'm hoping that I can use these guys for Warhammer Fantasy 8th Edition. But even more so, I'm curious. As I look at this box, I have to think that Games Workshop is intending to use this for not only Age of Sigmar, but also for Warhammer the Old World when it's released. These models seem to fit with Warhammer Fantasy, and I could be wrong, so I don't have any insider knowledge whatsoever, but I have to think that they're getting a twofer out of this kit, and that we'll see these models used in Warhammer the Old World when it's released, hopefully in 2023 or 2024. So I'm thinking, if these models don't fit on a 25 mil base, that means that Warhammer the Old World is going to probably have square bases, it sounds like, but that these square bases might actually get larger, and that your smaller troops like your goblins and zombies that are normally on 20 mil bases, potentially they'll be on something larger like a 25 mil, and then your bigger things like orcs, chaos warriors, beastmen, bestigor, things of that nature are going to be on maybe something slightly larger than a 25 mil base. Again, this is all hypothetical, but I am suspecting that this kit might give me a good indicator as to that question. So will these models fit on a 25 mil base and rank up? That's the question.
All right, so I'll give you a little bit of commentary during the assembly process here, but I'm definitely not going to show you the whole thing. Number one, it took a long time to put these guys together. I was kind of surprised. I've assembled a lot of models over the years. I would say that these guys are fairly difficult to assemble. And, it's okay. It's not the end of the world, but there's definitely a huge range in Games Workshop's models and how difficult they are to assemble. So I would put this kit on the slightly challenging side. There are even a few times where I flip through the directions, and I typically don't gravitate towards the directions unless something seems unclear to me when assembling models, or just you look at a kit and it's like, okay, wow, this is just extremely complicated. Like the Mortis engine was kind of like that for me. If you're familiar with the plastic Mortis engine kit, that one was kind of brutal, and I just methodically went through the directions step by step. So I start going through this kit and looking at it. The first thing I look at is the bases that are included, which are those round. I don't actually know their size. I think that maybe they're 30 mil. I'm not 100% on that though, but they don't actually seem that much larger than a 25 mil square. They are bigger for sure. And, I'm starting to feel like, okay, this is kind of promising. Like maybe these guys are actually going to work out. And I'm looking at the kit, and the kit's actually pretty nice. There's a really nice standard in there that I'm thinking, wow, that could even potentially be used as like a BSB or something. The shields are just gorgeous. I think some of the best Games Workshop shields I've ever seen, but they're super bulky. But I'm looking at the shields, and I think the nice thing about the shields is that they're clearly designed that it looks like they're going to be kind of close into the body, which I really like, because I feel like some of the shields that I see in Warhammer, it looks like they're held out fairly far away from the body, which never made a lot of sense to me. I mean, maybe like, because whenever you're looking at a stationary model, obviously you're just getting kind of a moment in time kind of a capture here. So yeah, of course, at some point in the battle, your shield's probably away from you, but generally speaking, you want your shield pretty close to you, because if it's not near your torso and near your important bits, it's hard for it to do its job. All right, so I jumped ahead here, but just like the previous Chaos Warrior kit, which I really like that kit actually quite a bit. Just like that kit, the cloaks aren't particularly optional. right? You essentially have the model split into two halves. You have the front half and the back half, and they just sandwich together. So, for me, this would be a lot easier if the cloak was kind of optional. And although I like the cloaks, I think they look cool. I think they also would look cool without the cloaks and just be kind of like this big armored guy. Might also be easier to paint. But yeah, it would require just a huge conversion to not put the cloak on. So I kind of get why they do it. It's probably easier for production, and then the cloak, when it's part of the back, you're not going to have a gap between like the torso of the back and the cloak itself. So I do like that look, like it's one thing and it's not a huge back, like it's flowing off his back and there's big gaps. But at the same time, I wish you had the option. Maybe you could have some guys with cloaks and some guys without cloaks, and that might help as well. And the cloaks are really dynamic, so I hate to be too critical of them. Like, they look super cool. And I could see if I was just doing a one-off guy that doesn't have to stand next to another guy, I might love it. But yeah, just kind of methodically going through here. So the only other real significant thought I had here was that the heads were awesome. Like, I really like the head options on these guys. And there's a fair amount of variation. So I thought that was cool. The shields are great. I thought the armor was nicely detailed. I wish it had a few more weapons options. I felt like, and granted, I'm not familiar with Age of Sigmar, so maybe the weapon options aren't as critical, and maybe that's not intended for Warhammer the Old World. Again, I don't know, but I wish you had a few more arm options. And it seems like you have what looks like a halberd in one hand. The shield is not really super optional unless you're wanting to do a conversion, which I was okay with that because I'm thinking, okay, these could be chosen. And the shield's not a bad option, even if you're going halberd, because they're probably going to get shot at on the way in. They give them a better armor save. But still, yeah, I kind of wish it was more optional. But you'd have to do some kind of conversion because it doesn't come with a ton of various arms. So I thought the bits were a little light in certain areas. I would have liked extra shield or two. I would have liked, more variation with the weapons and arms, an arm pointing. They do have an arm in there like holding the severed head, which is maybe a little overdone. But yeah, so there's some cool stuff in there, but I would have loved a few extras in that regard.
So ultimately, the question I'm trying to answer with all of this process, number one, is do they rank up on 25 mil bases? And I am looking at this. I didn't glue them to the bases, but I started placing them as kind of a test fit here. And I think individually, they do okay. But these cloaks are just massive. So, I don't know. I mean, you could, I guess, trim part of the cloak. Maybe that's what I'll do. So, like, if I were to cut this portion of the cloak off, and that might look okay, actually, so that it's not quite so flared out. Just cut it straight up here to here, and I think that will actually look okay. I think the answer, as is, they don't rank up. I think if you trim the cloaks, trim that part off so that it just goes straight down, which I think will actually look okay. I think you can get these guys to rank up if you do that. But just as they come, they just don't quite fit on these 25 mil bases ranked up next to each other. That cloak is just coming way too far over on the next base. I can get those two next to each other, but I just can't keep going, right? Everything is just kind of spilling over here. So this was true for some 8th edition models too, right? They're really hard to rank up sometimes. Your plastic orc boys, your ghouls from the vampire counts. There's plenty of models in 8th edition that really struggled to rank up. I think if you're willing to cut the cloaks, now it's kind of a bummer. The cloaks are super cool, right? They're super dynamic. and they really flare out, which is neat, but you can't have the shield flaring out, the cloak flaring out, and the weapon flaring out, and things coming out on all ends. So I think that's what I'll end up doing, is actually trimming those cloaks, because I do want these guys to rank up. I think what I'm going to do is use these as chosen, because they're different enough from my old style Chaos Warriors, and I don't have any chosen models, and the chosen models are super expensive. So if you were watching this video primarily because you want to know if these guys rank up, which I assume you are, the answer, in my opinion, is no, unless you're willing to alter them substantially by cutting those cloaks. I think it is possible, though, and I think those alterations, I don't really think that they'll deter too much from the coolness of the model. But you have these cloaks that just flare out way too much for these guys to rank up. So what does this tell me about, potentially Warhammer the Old World? Unfortunately, I think the answer is nothing. I'm not 1,000% sure that these models are intended to be used for both Age of Sigmar and Warhammer the Old World. It seems likely in my mind. It still does. And if these models are intended to be put on square bases as they're made, then I have to assume that those bases are going to be larger than 25 millimeters. Otherwise, it just doesn't work, even in a small unit of 10 here. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, do you think these models are intended for both games? And maybe it's too soon to tell. Maybe they have something else in mind. Are you anticipating bigger base sizes for Warhammer the Old World? Are you wanting that? I have mixed feelings about it, to be honest with you. So part of me thinks about a bunch of the models that I have that really struggle to rank up, and I wouldn't mind rebasing them on bigger bases. And then another part of me doesn't want to rebase hundreds of models. So I definitely do have mixed feelings about it. It would also mean potentially new movement trays if you're still going 5 wide, and a model that used to be on 20 mil is now on 25 mil. Your movement tray has to go from 100 mil to 125 mil wide. So it would mean that some of my movement trays would essentially be obsolete and have to be replaced. So it's a lot of work, but it is a mixed bag, I think. So let me know your thoughts. Hopefully you found this helpful, especially if you were considering buying this kit. If you're buying this kit with the intention of putting them on 25 millimeter bases out of the box without converting them, I don't see it. If you're willing to convert them, different weapons maybe, but the main culprit here are these cloaks. These cloaks flare out a lot. They're super cool, and just as an individual model, right, on the base that they come on, I think they work quite well. But the base that they come with, it's a round base. I don't know, it's interesting. The diameter is actually smaller than a corner to corner 25 mil. That is interesting. But of course, with the slantedness, the square bases have a beveled edge. So the part you're placing your model on is actually smaller than the 25 mil at the bottom. But yeah, the diameter of these bases is less than 25 mil. But you're getting a round base. So the surface area, I think, is probably significantly more. Yeah, just looking at it. So there's that. And then I don't think they're quite as close together when you put round base next to round base. And then, of course, if you're skirmishing, it probably doesn't matter. I don't really know the rules for Age of Sigmar well, so I don't know how close your models are supposed to be. So hopefully you liked this video. Hopefully you found it helpful. And if you did, please consider clicking that like button and the subscribe button. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.